Did it. It did it. Oh, I meant to ask you titles. It's not doctorate, right? Or anything like that. Like
Oh,
titles that matter where you're like, no, I need this. And
oh yeah, no, Ekemini's fine. Yeah.
perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go.
Okay.
Ekemini Uwan, right? I'm so terrified to say names wrong. Did I do it?
Uwan.
I did
Yeah,
it.
you're
Did
close
it
enough.
wrong. Did it wrong. Oh well, I apologize. I
Yes.
I do the best I can.
Oh,
Um,
I understand.
already screwing up. Here we go. Welcome to the podcast. I'm glad that you're here. I'm sorry that I could not bring your co-authors and co-hosts with you.
I know.
Yeah,
Fine.
my calendar keeps moving. We were talking just a minute ago with whatever little league and my three children's extracurricular activities and or school decides to say is more important than the rest of the world. So I apologize, but good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
See, that's the old habit. See, because that's yeah, glad to have you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, a couple questions just to kind of frame you. So, when you try to say, "Here's what an Ekemini is," what is that? Like, who and what is that?
Well, yeah. So I'm a public theologian, but most importantly, I'm a child of God. And I see myself as a servant of the Lord, more specifically, a public servant of the Lord. And so I do a lot of God talk in public, and from the Truth Table podcast to now the Truth Table book, Black Women's Musings on Life, Love, and Liberation, where now I'm officially an author,
Mm.
but also a writer. So I've written for The Atlantic, Washington Post, and Hallmark Mahogany. I'm a contributing writer there, and also have been on the Racial Justice Commission for the Aspen Institute. So I work in a lot of different spaces, secular, non-secular.
Hmm.
Yeah, proclaiming the gospel in
I knew
many
most of those, though. I'm curious, what is the Hallmark thing? Like, is that because there's
Mahogany.
a channel and there's cards, and I'm sure there's other things that
They also
Hallmark
have a
does.
newly developed writing community that they started at the beginning of this. Well, oh wait, well, I guess toward the end of last year is when they started it actually.
Huh.
And yeah, so that's a brand new, hub for them.
That's fun. I did not know they did that.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. So I know how much work doing a podcast is, because I do this one by myself. So how do you jump from podcasting? Actually, why do you even do podcasting? I guess is a better question because that's always a question that I enjoy answering for people. And then sometimes I realize, shoot, 20 minutes later, what were we talking about? Kind of how did you get into that? And then why pivot into authoring a book? And the book is so it's going. So you don't know this, and I haven't told your co-hosts either. Um, I send a book out to a few patron subscribers of the show each month, and so this book is next month's book. Um,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, it's not a tremendous amount of humans, but I do find it a tremendously powerful book.
Oh,
But yeah,
thank you.
so how do you get into podcasting and then pivot that into like why? Why that's a lot of work, like just a lot on top of all the other things that you said you do.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Podcasting is definitely a full-time job. I'd love to be paid full-time for that. Whoever's listening, please.
Where's the line?
And say that again.
Where's the line for that? I'll get in that line.
Exactly. Well, honestly, when we started podcasting, none of us were really podcast listeners. Step one. Step two, we didn't know what we were getting into. We were just like, okay, we'll show up and talk about things and go on our merry way. Like, wait, no, wait, hold up. This is a business? So, like, what do we do? Keep this thing up? Like,
Where I have to pay taxes? I have to pay tax. Okay.
I was like, wow, this is okay. So we got more than we bargained for, and definitely more than we got. And so initially what happened, how Truth Table even came to be was that the producer for Pass the Mic, Bo York, reached out to me and said, hey, we were in St. Louis at a conference together, and he was like, you should have a podcast, and I was like, I don't know if I want to carry a show by myself, much talk, much opportunity for sin. So I was like, I don't know if I really want to do that. And I just don't really like the spotlight on me.
Yeah.
Too much, honestly. I never wanted to be able to see myself. I think sometimes people end up building their own kingdoms, and they find themselves in a one-sided competition with God. And so I'm like, I don't want to do that. And so he was like, well, what about if you, Michelle and Christina started a podcast? And I was like, that might work. I was like, we just started a group chat a couple months ago, and that's been really fun and cool. And so I just asked them, hey, would you guys want to start this? Would you want to do a podcast?
And which one of you is editing it? Because it's not me.
Right. And I was like, well, pray about it. Get back to me. No, we didn't even know. We didn't even know about any of that. I'm telling you, we were really like, I don't know. We had no clue. We really didn't know we were doing. And so they both came back with a yes. And so we're like, okay. And Bo was the one that was like, we'll produce it and take care of everything. You know, like, okay, on the back end. And I was like, great. Because
excellent.
They don't take care of the back end. There's no true state because we're not editing. Yes, we produce. We absolutely produce. We're over production, all of that. But the directions of the show, the topics, the series, that's what us all Truth Table, the name, all of us, but the creative content, but the technical editing.
But I hand them a file and then it comes out on the internet somewhere.
Yeah, and then they put it out. That's it. Yeah, I do the show notes, do all that stuff. So anyway, that's how Truth Table, the podcast came to be. We came up with the name, came up with the tagline. And then through the success of the podcast, we've been podcasting for 5 years, and we're now on our 6th season. About this in 2019, I was approached by Penguin Random House to write a book by an editor there, and I said, okay, I have a book idea, you know, but I was like, I'm not ready. It's just still germinating, pretty much. And she was like, well, what about a book for Truth Table? And we had been approached by a couple of other publishers to do a Truth Table book, but the money just wasn't there. There's 3 of us. So the money has to be, you know, at least sufficient enough for us to say no to certain gigs in order for us to say yes to this.
Yeah.
And so we did sign with Penguin. And well, the pandemic began and everything was shut down. We were accustomed to traveling all the time to speak, to do Truth Table Live, to do a whole host of things, if you will, in the before times. And we were like, well, maybe this is the time, you know, to write the book. Maybe we'll have more time. We all thought we were going to have more time. That didn't happen. But anyway, we did it. We signed the deal in summer 2020. And now we're here with a whole book now. Where is my book? Right here. In hand, it's here.
I am jealous of that physical copy. So any of the books, so you don't know this about me, but I don't talk to an author about what we're talking about unless I've read every word that they wrote about what we're talking about, because I find that disrespectful to your time to come in here with some not stupid questions. That's the wrong way to say that. I want to have the same energy. You bled things out onto a page. And so I would like to at least look at that blood before we talk about it. Yeah. But my wife gets mad if I could turn my camera to the left of me, there's a bookshelf full of books. Many of them I purchased, a lot of them I didn't. And then to the right of me, there's 4 stacks of books that are as tall as my 6-year-old. And my wife's like, stop. So I only now ask for the digital books because then I can hide. Hide that guilt and that shame of
That's so funny.
Yeah. So you wrote 4 chapters in this book, correct? Yes, 4.
Yes,
3, 4,
each of us.
4.
Yeah, there's 3 of us, so we each wrote 4 chapters. So
yeah.
12 total.
Yeah. So just at a high level, so the book's called Truth Tables, Black Women's Musings. The rest is memorized and I don't have it. Fill it in for me.
Love and liberation.
That's it. Yes. Life, love. Yes. Did y'all kind of work in one massive Google document, or did you just write what was on your minds? Here's what happened and here's what we're talking about. And then we come back and there's some magic happens with the spirit and you're like, yes, see how these all go together? And I ask that because I ask the same question of every single human that's on this show. And at the end of the year, I edit those into something else. I assign everybody's answer a number, and then I have my kids pick the numbers. And oddly enough, it always tells a story, and I have nothing to do with that. And it is amazing. And that will make more sense at the end of the episode when I ask you that question. So I'm always fun when there's a collaboration of sorts. I always find that fun. So kind of how does that work for y'all?
Yeah. So so what we did was for the book proposal, did the book proposal when it's time to put in our chapters. I simply was like, well, we just don't have time to macromanage each other. We trust each other, and we trust each other to do to stay in our lane of expertise and do what we do. And so I literally put in my chapters, Christina put in her chapters and her chapter summaries, and Michelle put in hers. And that's really what that was. Then when it was time to write, we wrote, in isolation, in that we didn't have a shared Google Doc. Like, okay, here's my section for my chapters and yours. No, it was like, okay, write your chapters, let's get it in for the deadline and submit it straight to the editor. So none of us saw each other's chapters through the process. And so we didn't know really the content of what either of us had written, but besides like little screenshots, of little, oh my goodness, let's put this in the book, and things like that. But none of us read each other's chapters before the editorial process. Our editor got the chapters, and then we came together when it was time to edit the book. We wanted to go to New York to edit the book in person together, just around the table. But because of at that juncture in the pandemic, we still didn't have vaccines yet, so we weren't able to do that. Yeah. And it surges, which a surge is happening right now. So we were like, okay, let's just do it on Zoom. So we all read our book aloud, one by one, and just read it. Okay, stop, say that again, rework that. Literally, that's how we how the Truth Table book came to be. And so, there was a lot of trust in that process, because, we did not read each other's chapters before. Like, you need to rewrite this or do another topic. And that's not the case. Well, you have and what we have, and we're going to work with that. So that's what we.
Yeah, no, I like that. So of the 4 chapters, I know which one is the hardest to write, because I think you say so at the beginning of it. It's the episode. It's the chapter on colorism. I'm curious which one just kind of naturally flowed out, though, of the 4 that you wrote, where you're like, yes, absolutely. I've been trying to say this for 4 years, and I'm glad that you're letting me. Like, which is the one?
That's a good question. I had to think about, Diaspora Dreams, Blackness is the Image of God. That's the one. It's the brand new one that has I'm not building off of anything prior to. This is like fresh and have been something I've been thinking about, for years. So not that it's easy, but I knew I had somewhat of a direction in which I wanted to go and things I wanted to talk about. And so, that's the final chapter of the book, actually.
It is, actually. So I have a couple questions on that chapter. So I have a couple questions from each of your chapters. So in that chapter, you say there is no shortage of theologians who have proffered countless theories of what it means for human beings to be made in the image of God. Some say the image of God is functional, and that it is what we do and not necessarily who we are. And so I think when people say the image of God, they usually are using it as, at least the way that I was raised, that humans have superiority over everything, because I'm the image of God. I'm going to dominate you. I got my dog here. That's not the image of God. Although, how could that not be? What an unconditional love creature. However, can you talk to me a bit about the image of God and kind of how that waves its way into the overall narrative of this book?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, even from the beginning, the dedication is to Black women who considered leaving a church when their imago Dei was not enough, when they're embodied where how God made them in their embodied Blackness has been made to be despised, denigrated, maligned in a host of church spaces, and not even just in the church, outside of the church, right? In America on the whole. And so talking about, who we have been made to be, how we have been created, from our features to our mannerisms, our way of speech, our way of life, all of those things reflect the image of God, all of those things. And we have a body. God chose us to create us in this beautiful Black bodies. And so we're trying to uphold that. And so, and I mean, unless we are Gnostics, we affirm that the flesh that God has created us in, that our embodiedness is a good thing. Not to say that we're perfect. We're not perfect, that's for sure. That's why we're being sanctified and being made more and more like Christ. But it's a progressive sanctification, but it's not linear, that's for sure. We go up, we go down, we plateau, we have our moments. But I think that you see that throughout the chapters, from the first page of the book, that's not even numbered, right? Because it's like literally the dedication to the end, of the book, and talking about what we don't know what we'll be like in heaven, but we know that we'll be like God. And we know that we will have a body just like Jesus has a body now.
Yeah.
Who's interceding for us now, unless we believe that he raised us Casper the Friendly Ghost, which I think a lot of Christians actually do believe, don't seem to believe. I'm like, Jesus is embodied right now. Right now. He rose. This is a bodily resurrection, y'all. So, and we will rise too, So trying to just I think in a lot of ways, I'm really just trying to get back to the basics and fundamentals of the faith. Because I think in a lot of ways, there's a real profound biblical illiteracy and just, I don't know, illiteracy with regard to just the faith overall. I'm like, y'all know this is a tenet of the faith.
Yeah.
So just trying to get people, do you remember that? So I recall this to mind and let it bless you, So.
Yeah. This isn't in your book, but when you said the word Gnostic, for some reason, I picture the current church, its unhealthiness in its body, and like it's a body that has no purpose. Am I bending that word in the wrong way? I do not know enough about theology to know if I am.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite put it that way. I mean, I think I do touch on a little bit of Gnostic. I think I make an allusion to it anyway in I think Decolonized Discipleship. I think. And so
maybe that's why it's there then. Who knows? I'm always terrified with the amount of podcasts that I've done that none of my thoughts are original anymore. And they probably aren't.
Yeah, no, I would just say, the church, Jesus died for the church, and that, which is why I'm committed to the church, and so I think that the church is being perfected and being sanctified. And I do think that the American church, absolutely, God is going to, is going to begin and is already beginning to, I guess if you will, begin to correct, some of the corruption, here. And I thank God that the American church does not have the corner market on the gospel.
Correct.
And that the American church, America is the outermost parts of the earth. Okay. And so being able to locate ourselves in there as Westerners is really, really important. I think, think about the global big church and the invisible church. That's a church that God sees. And the visible church is the church that we see. It's God that's going to separate the sheep from the goat. That's not my job. My job is to be faithful and to do what God called me to do, so that when it's my time, I can hear well done.
Yeah. Amen on that. Yeah. So the first chapter of the book. So I was reading the book on vacation with my family.
Okay.
And because that's, we were up in the mountains. We literally intended to go up into the mountains. We were in a log cabin, very minimal. Like, we're not talking on the cell phone. Like, you either have the cabin number or you don't know where I am, and that's it. And we loved it. But it was amazing to kind of detach from everything for a while and just play games with my kids and that kind of stuff. So I'm reading the first chapter and I literally set it down and I was like, wow, that was a kick to the mouth. Like, I wasn't expecting that on colorism. Being that it's the whole book is framed like we're writing this not to a white man. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but like, I'm not the intended audience. And so I was trying to read it with a lens of, okay, well, what is this saying to me? And like, I was not prepared for a chapter on colorism, because I think you're right. A lot of people don't talk about it, or they talk around it without saying it. And because it's never named, it's not really a thing. So for those listening that haven't read the book, shame on you, but also you couldn't have bought it until today anyway. So, so
you could have pre-ordered it, but now just buy it. Go ahead and buy.
So what is colorism? Like, just that as a whole. And then I also want to kind of talk about that bleachification cream, because that's not a thing that I was sadly, I was ignorant of that. And like, I read it and I was like, wait, what? I asked my wife and she's like, yeah, that's a thing. I was like, why? Like, that, why? I'm stumbling on like, what the hell? Like, I just, so can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah. So yeah, colorism is, well, I mean, guess I could start out with white supremacy is the why,
Mm,
um,
fair enough.
and uh, the how of it and what of it is that colorism is, it's, let me say it this way, it's intraracial discrimination against people with darker skin people and preference for people with lighter skin tones. And colorism is practiced outside of intraracial groups. And so this happens within Black, Latinx, Asian communities, pretty much non-white communities all over
Mhm,
the globe.
mm,
Colorism is is a present reality, but it is also practiced by white people outside of the group as well, and so who will either confer benefits to lighter skinned people because of their proximity
mm,
on
yeah.
the color spectrum, right? They're lighter, so they're a little bit closer, in proximity with regard to skin tone, to white people than say a darker skinned woman like myself. And so they experience higher pay. They get lesser sentencing time when they
Mhm,
interface with the criminal justice system. They have a better mate selection
mm,
within the marriage pool, are most likely to be married over against darker skinned women. So it's a host of things that, um, yeah, that there are interpersonal and structural realities that come along with colorism.
yeah. So what and this is a question that you phrase in the book, but I like your answer, and so I'd like you to lean into that. What does our Bible actually have to say about colorism? Because you actually quote a part of Song of Songs or Song of Solomon. I'm not sure which one of those I'm supposed to say. It depends on the book
Mhm,
that I have,
mhm,
the Bible that I have.
mhm,
I never read that part, mostly because I grew up Baptist, so we don't talk about anything that could be not from Paul. If Paul didn't
mhm,
write it, then we're not talking about it.
mhm.
Um, so maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's my church, but I feel like that's right. Yeah, we don't talk about Peter. We don't do James. It's Paul or the Gospels. That's all we get. That's it. um, so what does the Bible have to say about colorism?
Oh yeah, I think the Bible has to say a lot about it. It's absolutely a sin, a
Mm,
wicked one at that. And it has been nailed to the cross, and it will be cast into the pits of hell. Hallelujah. But until then, until that full manifestation of that reality comes into play, of course, upon Christ's return, we have to do the work of dismantling um, that structural
mm,
wickedness, which is what colorism is. Just as we need to do that with white supremacy and racism, and sexism and misogyny and all those things. We have to do the work of naming it, and then dismantling it, and making repair for those things, or yeah, and for those ways that oppresses, in this case, dark skin,
yeah, yeah,
black people.
yeah. So this bleachification process, um, I understand why that's a thing because it's based upon an unrealistic. Here's what it is to be beautiful, which is absolutely ridiculous. Uh, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Mhm.
But I want to talk about it less from a personal angle in the story that you tell in the book, which is heartbreaking. Like I, I'm sorry that that ever happened to anyone.
Mhm.
Because that can't just be your story. That's
Oh,
I'm sure that's millions of people's story.
mhm.
Um, but you talk about again in the diaspora chapter the bleachification of Christ, and so
Mhm.
how do those kind of conflate? And for those listening, like what I'm talking about is you tell a story in the chapter in the very first chapter of the book of a cream that you're like applying to your skin that's
Mhm.
changing the pigment of your skin,
Mhm.
but only where you're applying it, which seems weird. Which
Mhm.
when you apply bleach to things, it's damaging. So I'll let people's imagination kind of run away with that. But yeah, how is that related to the bleachification of Christ?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, when you think about the fact that, I mean, I guess they're all interrelated, even from colorism to decolonized discipleship, even down to, um, the diaspora dreams chapter. And then even if you were to go into the singleness one, in the way that colorism, also impacts my story of singleness. Um, you know, I talk about in decolonized discipleship, the picture of white Jesus as a controlling image. that's meant to make you despise who you are.
Mm.
It's meant to make you think white is right, uh, black is not. And so when you have an image, a controlling image, which is Patricia Hill Collins' language, not my own, but I do cite her in the book. That's from Black feminist thought. But I mean, you have that controlling image of white Jesus. That's from very early in a
Mm.
host of different church spaces, including Black church spaces, by the way.
Mm.
You have it makes you think that this gospel is actually not for you,
Mm.
which is how you know how much of a myth, a dangerous and diabolical myth that is when you're talking about an Eastern religion
Yeah.
that is Afro-Asiatic in nature. What in the world? Like, how can we ever think that this gospel is not for us as Black people? But that is what you're made to think, which is why there's this echo and continual question about, is Christianity the white man's religion? Because all you see is white Jesus, and all you see is white angels, and all your little picture book from Bible when you're young have all white characters till this day still.
Yeah.
My niece has one of those, and I have got to buy her a Bible that does not have that, but that's already implanting, you know what I mean, these seeds that let you know that white is right and Black is not. And so if you have that type of mentality, you're internalizing that. That's internalized racism. That's internalized, and that's white supremacy right there. The normalization of whiteness over against everything else. So everything else it's everything else. It's other, right?
Yeah.
And so you're othered. And so you begin to take those images in and you think, oh, white is right, clearly, because even in my Bible, everybody's white, which is false. But yeah, so then you begin to really, you take those messages in, and then you look at the media, that's what you see. You look at magazine, that's what you see. Especially if you're a Black woman, then you see on TV, I see Black men with white women. What? Wow, like that's the way. That is the message that you're given.
Yeah.
And so as a dark-skinned Black girl growing up in California, where you saw that all the time, I'm thinking, I need to be lighter, so that I can have the benefits and the privileges that, my light-skinned sisters have,
Yeah.
And even that ad, there's an ad in the book that confirms.
That's when I set down the book. Like that's when I set it down. Because let me find the ad. I think I have the page number written down. Like literally, I was angry because I don't know where you got that. That looks like microfiche. But like for those listening, here's the ad break. So it says the nicest things that happen to girls with light, bright complexions, which is ridiculous. But then just even in the thing, has your phone quit ringing lately? Perhaps your complexion's to blame. Like that's when I set the thing down. I'm like, well, this is what this is. How is this? Like how is it? Like, I'm so glad that I didn't. I don't know. Like I don't. This not. I can't. I don't know how to put words to it. Like I'm so mad. I'm so mad because it's just wrong. Like it's just. Yeah. I don't know. I'm very rarely speechless. I'm still mad about that stupid ad. I don't think I would have been as mad if the ad wasn't in there, and I'm blaming this on you or your.
Yeah, I put that in there because I wanted people to know, because I think oftentimes the conversation of colorism resorts into gaslighting. It's in your head. You're making it up. No, here's the data.
Yeah.
Here's the ad. Here are the numbers. Here's the stats. We're not making it up.
Yeah.
This is real. So.
Yeah. What is that ad in? Like, where did that come from?
Natanola, that was probably in all the Ebony's Jets, probably all of those Black magazines, but this one was from the African American Institute of Historical Studies, I believe, where there was that website that kind of archives. There was an article on there about colorism.
Yeah,
was in there, and so.
Yeah.
But it's not the first time I've seen those ads. I mean.
Yeah. Oh, well, it was for me. I'm still mad about it.
You can. Yeah, and these things are everywhere.
Yeah. So what is it to be a truth teller? I mean, you got a table, right? You built this table. You didn't build a table. I don't know how. I'm gonna break this metaphor in a minute. What is it to tell the truth? Like to be a truth teller?
Yeah. I think to be a truth teller is to be a lover of truth first and foremost. Truth about ourselves, the truth about ourselves in relation to God, and the truth about ourselves in relation to one another. And I think that we have to love truth above all else, even when the truth cuts us,
Mm.
even when it doesn't make us look too pretty, right? So we love the truth when when we're being lauded and praised, but we don't love the truth when somebody's telling us that was messed up. You need to confess your sin and you need to repent and turn. Well, all of a sudden we can't hear anything. Oh no. Wait a minute. I don't know if I like that truth, or I'm not sure if you're seeing that right. And so I think it's first and foremost, you have to be able to love truth, I think, for yourself, even when it's hard to receive. And then and then out of that place you tell the truth to others, but as a outworking of love, not as a weapon used to lord it over other people or to harm other people, but just to tell them, nah, this is the way you need to go, walk in it, because God has better for you.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it comes with a lot of a great cost. Let's say it comes at great cost.
Yeah. So there's a part where you tell a joke in here of a website, which is not, it's spelled out in a weird way. Maybe it's just the ARC copy that I have, but it's ahotmess.com. And you're talking about it again in that first
that's
chapter.
just right.
Yeah. So I went to that and it's available. Like you could buy that again. Like you could buy that website. So what would you do with that website? Like you get off this and you're like, oh, I'm taking that. I want that. Like, what are you going to do with that website?
That's so funny that you went to the website.
I just wanted to see. I did the who is. I'm like, hey,
it was
she
just a
can have this. I'm gonna tell her.
term, a little hotmess.com. Oh god, I don't know. What is not a hotmess.com? I mean, Elon Musk buying Twitter, that's a hotmess.com.
I still don't know what to do with that.
It's more than a hot mess, actually. It's very dangerous, actually, what's happening. There's a lot. I mean, there's just a lot on there. I don't even know. I just guess this. You don't have all day, honestly. There's really a lot of mess and chaos.
Well, I read it and I was like, I wonder if that's even available. I was like, hey, it is. So I feel like I had to tell you because
that's funny.
Domains are cheap, just get that and sit on it. Do whatever you want to do with it later.
That's funny. I would rather go to joyful things, I'm saying, Black Joy site or something. I'm just like, there's enough mess to go around. I don't even want to dwell on.
So in the chapter on decolonizing discipleship, which those two words by themselves probably need to be broken apart, which you do in the chapter. But you say, if I'm being honest, I become increasingly concerned with the way that our people are leaving the faith and thereby throwing out the proverbial baby out with the bathwater due to legitimate racial trauma, hypocrisy, church hurt, and spiritual abuse. And then the time has come, long overdue, for the church to implement decolonized discipleship. And I can say I hear a lot of that. So I get a lot of emails from the show. You talked about at the beginning, starting a podcast, not knowing what the heck you were doing. And I hear that. And all of a sudden, I think I'm also 5 or 6 years in. I get hundreds of emails a month. I have conversation with people that I probably should not be having because I'm not a pastor and I'm not trained in anything other than banking to have any kind of conversations of merit with people. You know what I mean? And it becomes its own thing. And I don't know how to answer those questions, but I hear so many people saying, I'm out. Like I'm just done with all of this. Like I think you're right. People just like, I'm done. Another story came out. Here we go. Julie Roy's published another post. This person did another thing. This pastor did this, and I'm done. I'm sick of it. I'm done with it. I'm over with it. So what kind of is that to name that decolonized discipleship? Like naming that, what is that and kind of how does that work?
So I think so. I wrote this a blog post called Decolonized Discipleship. Back in 2018, before this recent or more modern movement toward deconstruction, and I guess decolonization is what some people, they use. Some people use the term synonymously. I don't know. I see them as two different projects, which is why I put forth a different framework, for how to approach decolonized discipleship, which is like, I'm just really calling us to disentangle the Christian faith, the Eastern Christian faith, from the sinful mechanisms and additives of American Christianity and those trappings that are ensnaring many people and are really a stumbling block to a lot of people. Rightfully so, So to me, I thought it was important to be able to say, like, no, this is legitimate. The pains or hurts, the things that you're witnessing, they're legitimate, legit, but don't don't forsake Jesus, don't throw away the faith, behind these things. There is, you can get to the other side, and I guess you could say this is kind of like, here's how.
Yeah.
Like I too have experienced, some of these things, and I give, those examples, in a host, a variety of different spaces in which I've been in. So to me, it was important to be able to kind of thread that needle so that people can see, like, oh, there's another way, yo. Like, don't run, don't run,
Yeah.
don't let go of Jesus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because a lot of, when you're traumatized like that, you're subject to black and white thinking, and so you really just can't do nuance because your brain is stuck. So it's just like it's all good or it's all bad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's like, no, there is another way. So that's why I had to name that the racial trauma and the fallout from the Trump regime. That's really what the wages of what we're seeing now is. Is the consequences of
Yeah.
this election.
So I'm curious. So you write in that same chapter on decolonizing discipleship, or maybe I'm saying those backwards. You got a couple different things that humans should do as they're evaluating how to wrestle with this. And so I'd like to read those questions, but more importantly, which is the one do you think is for you right now, or if someone was reading this chapter, emails you and says, "Hey, I need to wrestle and I need to do some work here." So the questions are, so which one do you feel like is where you should start? And I kind of will tell you where it is for me, and maybe that's why maybe I'm wrestling with this. Actually, I'm certain that I'm wrestling with this. So so some of the questions that you should ask yourself, it says, when you're evaluating whether or not your church is deriving their theology from kingdom or empire. So some of those questions are: does this theology call me to a deep love for God that causes me to pursue holiness and radical love for my neighbor? Does it benefit, or does this theology cause me to benefit at the privilege at the expense of the marginalized? Does it call for good news for everyone, regardless of their racial or socioeconomic status? And then you go on, and I won't read them all. But then the one that hits the most for me is: does this theology cause me to look in the mirror and marvel at God's handiwork instead of despising my reflection? And I don't even mean that in like I'm a bald white dude. Like, I'm not the most attractive man. Maybe I used to be when I had hair, but I'm not anymore. Like, I don't even mean it that way. Like, I mean it like a soul level. Like, no, you're right where you need to be. Like, you're whole, you're beloved, you're loved, So of those questions, which one do you think would be the one that you would respond back with and say, yeah, wrestle with this, because this one is pivotal to the rest?
It's hard to say, honestly. It kind of depends on who it is, right? It depends on their social location, I think.
Mm,
Like for that last one, like, do you like who you see in the mirror?
mm,
Like, are you able to? And really, what I'm getting at for that person, and because it is this, I mean, this is the chapter that's probably a little bit more extends a little bit beyond the table into the standing section room, if you will. That's what we call the standing section. Everybody that's not a Black woman at Truth Table is, or a fan of Truth Table, is in the standing room section. And so I think that does get at the fact that, the ways in which we are taught to despise and to hate ourselves. And so it's like, man, like, which again is that kind of like that controlling image of that Jesus and that whiteness, and like, what, how do I love myself? Can I say that I am good, like that my Blackness is good? Can you say that? So it depends on who, is
mhm,
asking me, or who is inquiring. It depends on their social location and where they are. I think all of them are helpful diagnostic questions to see where you're at,
mm,
and why, where did you even begin to formulate, or that thought around either theology or your church context, or about yourself, like, where did that start? And causing people to really do some serious introspection,
mm,
and soul searching, because I really can't give you the answers to that. I can't. Only these are questions meant for you and God to wrestle with, and for you to take into your prayer closet. So even if a person was to email me, I'd be like, I'm glad you're wrestling with that. I invite you to go and talk to God about that.
Yeah.
One, and then I will invite you, to go and talk to your pastor about these things, because I do think this book it provides as a holistic discipleship book. I do think it lends
Yeah.
itself well, I'd say, to the church to be able to talk about real things that people probably felt were off limits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Church, that things
Yeah.
that they felt like maybe God has nothing to say about these things because they don't hear it spoken about.
Quite
And
literally the reason the name of the show is the name of my show. That's quite
there
literally the
you go.
reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had a
So,
friend, he lives over in Charlottesville. And
okay.
he's like, yeah, we don't talk, can't talk about these topics. Like you can't talk about homosexuality or racism or money or politics. You can't talk about that stuff at the
Mhm.
church. I'm like, oh, that's it. You gave it to me, Josh. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk a bit about that standing room because that's where I'm at. I'm not at that table. Like I'm in that standing room. How long before you leave the standing room and they're standing the waiting area there? And then what do you do afterwards?
Yeah. So, yeah, for our standing room section people, it's it's about supporting the table.
Mm,
I think that's one thing that, it's one thing to say, yeah, I love True Shape, I support them, but none of that support is not shown in tangible ways, whether that's through purchasing our book, right? Supporting and actually reading
mhm,
the thoughts of Black women and reading us as credible sources, just like
mhm,
you read everybody else and you see them as credible sources and you pre-order immediately, right when your favorite theologian, whoever that is,
mhm,
most likely white male theologian, drops a new book or has another book about prayer coming out. You're like, okay, what else is this person going to tell me about prayer? But because you're sold out on this person, you're going to buy the book. It doesn't even matter. And so I think that's a tangible way. Obviously, there's also although we produce good content and there's things that there's so many more things that we love to do, but we lack resources. And so,
Yeah.
which we're grateful for our Patreon community, but I think the standing room section, what they can do is support the work of Truth Table,
Yeah.
literally like $5, $10 a month, or whatever, to support the work of Truth Table and the content that we produce, so that we can, pay staff and, and keep the work of the Truth Table going, pray out producers, all of those things that keep the show going,
Mhm,
and apply what you're also reading. So not just take it in as an intellectual exercise, which that's good, but also do the soul work of soul searching, of searching your own soul about these topics, about these issues, and learning and asking God, how can I love Black women better? How can I better serve my neighbor? I did not know this. I did not know about colorism. That is heartbreaking. It's terrible. It's wicked. You
mhm.
know, um, and so, like, what does that mean? In order to, or what does it look like to be an advocate? To be able to speak out when you see it in
Yeah.
action, or you see it in yourself, and to being able to check yourself as well, right? And to check your associates and your business partners, right? And your coworkers, when you hear them speaking up, when it's time to speak up, that,
Yeah.
so putting these things into practice in there's so many different ways
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the study room section can get involved.
Yeah. Just a small aside for those listening that have been listening to episodes for years with me. Um, I have never learned more than when I read a book from someone that is not a white male. Quite literally, um, a lot of the shifts in my life have come from women in my life, people of color in my life. Um, I was challenged by a quote from Professor Soong Chong Ra that basically said, hey, if you feel like you're not in an echo chamber, just look at the books on the wall. And if you don't see anybody that isn't a white guy, you're wrong. Like, I'm sorry if you're upset about that. And that's a paraphrase of his quote, but
Yeah.
you're just wrong.
Yeah.
And I was wrong years ago. I still am wrong a lot of the time. Just ask my kids and my wife and anyone else in my family. But I have never been stretched more profoundly than by people that don't look like me. And I think that's the way that it should be, because that's what it is to be in relationship with one another. Like
Yeah.
that's what it is to be a faith community together. I mean, I love my wife and we don't agree on a lot of things,
Of course.
but I still learn from that. So
Yeah.
just a small aside, you're right. And for those listening, she's right. So do something about it. So the question I like to ask everybody, Ekemini, is when you try to like wrap words around God or the divine or whatever adjective you want to put there now and there, like what is that?
Oh, okay. You mean, God, yeah, God is, goodness, I don't, yeah, God is just beyond, beyond what our finite minds and minds and imaginations can even hold or even contain. Um, God is thrice holy. I don't think that we emphasize God's holiness enough, and God's threeness. And yeah, God is thrice holy, triune, one God in three persons. Compassionate and abounding in love. And God is my friend.
Mm,
God is my friend. Jesus is my friend, and I get to say that, and I'm grateful for the gift of being able to say that because Jesus was not always my friend. I was an enemy of God. I'm very clear about that. That's about telling the truth. I was an enemy of God, and now I've been brought near, and have become have become a friend of God and a co-heir with Christ. So no matter what happens, no matter what opposition I face, I know that at the end of the day, um, I have a place in God's house, and that my name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And honestly, that's everything, and that's all that matters. At the
mm,
end of the day, when we're living in such perilous times, and we don't know when our lives will be demanded of us, you need to know that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And if you don't know, then you need to come to Jesus,
mm,
and try Jesus, and and taste and see that God is good. And
mm,
so that's what I would say
mm.
about God.
Mm, mm. Yeah. So see, now I feel bad. I love that answer, but now I feel bad that I took that prayer time away from you this morning and instead threw that on you in the similar time that you just. Yeah. No, I like how open ended the question is, and that's what I edit all together. And it always ends up like it's literally me saying, "Hey, we made it to the end of the year. Here we go." And you don't hear another word from me. And so it ends up being like an hour and 20 minutes of just people speaking of what God is. And it is
Okay.
literally
Yeah.
the most powerful hour of whatever the episodes are that I like. I don't know why. Like it's magical. And it does like it weaves a story where I'm like, oh, that sounds a lot like Luke. Like I've heard that story before. Or wow, that sounds a lot like Amos. Or what, you know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Something
That's
is powerful. And I love that darn question and that answer. So all right. So people are listening and they're like, yeah, I need to do something. Where is it most effective for them to buy the book, to do the things, to get on Elon Musk's Twitter and support y'all, whatever they need to do. I figured I would play right off of I don't know. Like where do you want people to go to support what you're doing and support the table there?
Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can support our work. Obviously, primarily, we want you to first and foremost buy the book,
Hmm.
Truth Table: Black Women's Musings on Life, Love, and Liberation, and then because yeah, you get our thoughts there, and then you can always listen to our podcast. Truth Table: Black Women's Musings on. Wait a minute, Truth Table. The original podcast is Truth Table. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. And so you can listen to our podcast. We're in season 6 right now. And you can always support our work on Patreon. That is helpful. Patreon.com/truth table. That is how we are able to pay, pay a lot, but pay our social media manager, our administrators, our production team, and you'll get videos. We have video episodes that we give to our patrons so they
Oh,
can
really?
watch
Cool.
us in action. So you do get a little something from us,
Yeah.
and then we always try to put in updates and things like that in there. And then we also, myself and Christina, we after this season, it's just Actually, starting probably midsummer, just myself and Christina moving forward with Truth Table. And so we
Really?
also have another podcast called Getting the Word with Truth Table. So
So that's
we
the
are,
second podcast, or
yeah, we launched that one during in January 1. And so that's a daily audio Bible podcast where you're hearing myself and Christina reading the Bible.
you said daily?
Yeah, that one's daily.
Oh my.
Yep. So that's intense because it's like, oh, you're always recording. So I got to do
Eh,
I did a recording yesterday. I got to do some more recordings. Probably tomorrow. I won't be
I
able
got
to.
anxious just now. I got anxious for you.
Daily audio Bible podcast. It's called Get in the Word with Truth Table. And then, of course, you can support us on our Patreon. That's another way to
Yeah.
support our work because that is a labor of love. It's been good getting in the Word, but it is like daily is much different than weekly. And so, yeah, you guys can support us that way. And so those are the ways you can support us. But yes, please do buy Truth Table, Black Women's Musings on Life, Love, and Liberation. Buy a couple copies, give them away. It is a type of book where I think it's like, because of the things that we're talking about, I do get a sense that it's the type of book you're going to give away to some to people when you're talking like, you need to read this.
Yeah.
It's the kind of book that I have a sense that it's like you're going to have a hard time holding on to because a lot of people going to be like, you need to read this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I have another book like that. I keep buying copies and I keep giving it away. It's Professor Soon-Chung Rah and Mark Charles's last book. I don't know if you're familiar with that book or not.
Yes.
On the name of the book escapes me now. It's a white cover.
Yeah.
I bought that book 6 times and I still don't have one here.
Yeah.
And the one that I gave away first has all of my highlights and notes in it, and I can't remember who I gave it to. But I will give them another one if they're listening. They're local here where I live. I just can't remember who it was.
The benefit of the Truth Table book is that there is at the back of the book is an opportunity for you to, it says my musings. So a couple of pages, so that you're able to, just write.
What you need to write.
It's gonna definitely bring up some feelings.
Yeah.
So buy your copy, and then you can write your musings. And when you write your musings, you're probably not gonna want to give away that copy. That's why you probably want to get a couple copies so you can give away. Because also they're gonna be pretty personal because of the sensitive nature of the topics that we're talking about too.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you for what you've written, and for that labor, and thanks for being here this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem. All right, I will end that there and end this here.